Welcome Painting 1 students. Today we're going to work on revising your sphere. We're going to introduce a couple new painting techniques and we're going to begin another little experiment and these are all things you need to try to have completed by next class. They are due, but you're going to have to put in a little bit of time working on this stuff. Here I have a sphere painting and I'd like you to check over your sphere painting. This one has some problems, and you might see problems in your paintings as well. In this case, the highlight here has a really distinct outline around it, and we can see that blending hasn't happened very well in some of these areas. The values are organized pretty well. We have, and you should check your painting for highlight, light, shadow, core shadow, reflected light, and cast shadow, and that these things are organized appropriately. This cast shadow should be a little higher on the left and a little lower on the right, and this should be kind of a crescent moon shape, this core shadow. And then you have this area of reflected light down here. And the sphere should kind of be sitting in a puddle of cast shadow there. But you really need to check that your placement is correct. You've worked on it. And now I'm going to show you some techniques of how you might be able to refine some of your value patterns beyond what you have. But you need to be willing to work back into it. We're gonna experiment here with techniques called dry brushing and scumbling. And I'm going to use these natural hair brushes that have the lighter handles. And you see they kind of have these are rounds and they kind of have these puffy tops to them. So I'm going to get some of this lighter tone, and I'm just going to get a little bit of the paint just on the top. See if you can see that. Where do I get? There we go. Just paint is just on the top of the bristles, just kind of dabbing it there. And then I'm going to go over here, and because my light was a little too dark, you're going to notice that it's lightening up. That was a correction that really needed to be made. The area of light should be, this tone right here should be just an off-white. But just taking it and just kind of dabbing it around like this to kind of layer over top of there and move it around. Then I'm going to take a separate brush, a second brush. I'm going to get some white on there. And again, I just want it with just the paint on the very tips of the bristles there. Just grabbing it, and then I'm going to go into the highlight here, and the highlight needs to blend out a little bit. So I'm going to take my brush here, and I'm going to just kind of dab around, and hopefully that highlight is going to kind of fade out into that area of light. I may work back and forth between the two of them to get that blending to occur. But what we don't want is an outline around that highlight the way that it was. We're trying to get these things to blend into each other. There should be a distinct highlight, but it shouldn't be have an outline around it. So now you can see the highlights kind of blending out a little bit better into the area of light that surrounds it. So this is just called dry brushing, and so you're kind of dabbing the brush down. Now you still want to get edges around here on the edge of your sphere, so you might switch over to one of your synthetic hair brushes that will allow you to get the edges and some of the application of paint a little smoother here. So I'm going to use this brush and I'm going to quickly clean up this edge as much as I can. But I really did need to lighten up that value. But that scumbling and really helps kind of smooth out the transition there, because we need transitions. That's kind of the primary technical focus of what we've been doing recently. Now, keeping the paint wet and moving kind of rapid is always important for us, and I can actually put down a pretty good amount of this light tone here. Get a little off there, but just cleaning up these edges as much as I can, and then trying to leave some of this paint down. Still want my highlight there to kind of fade out. Let me continually kind of play around with that transition. If I see it needs more. But while I got this wet here, I'm going to make sure I got some wet paint here. I'm going to put down my area of light, making sure it's wet, and then I'm going to put down an area of shadow there, which should be this number 3 value here. So we're kind of correcting some of the mistake from earlier. You can refer back to the painting, the sphere painting, for the kind of proper organization of these things. But if I get this paint put down here, so I got both of these happening here. And again, I can use this technique. I'm going to wash this brush out real fast so it doesn't have any paint. And I want it to still be fairly dry, but I can use this same idea. It's not totally washed out. The same idea, and I can kind of take this brush and I can work between those two areas doing the same kind of stippling technique. You see how that creates a much, you know, whereas we had kind of a harsh line, we take this brush and we just tap it, and it makes that hard edge go away. Very useful for blending things together. So you get a nice transition there. Sometimes we might have to work back in, and then we can use our synthetic hair brush. And sometimes I'll kind of scrub around with it also. And maybe try to get the blending, you know, adding and subtracting, working back and forth. Now I've got this area of shadow down here. I can do the same thing with the core shadow. Once I work from here, and I can get the use this other one. This one was already dedicated to that lighter middle tone. I can use it. And you see we got a nice transition starting to form there. Very smooth and subtle. We don't see where one value stops and the next one starts. Now I'm going to take, let me grab another brush. I'm using these round, synthetic rounds, but they actually kind of have the points. And I'm going to put in the number 5 value that we're supposed to be using for our core shadow. I'm going to kind of reassert its placement, and then we can do that stippling technique again to get these values readjusted. I mean, we could do wet on wet blending here also, but we're trying to explore maybe a different technique. I'm going to take even a smaller round here. I don't want the hairs to be super crazy. Sometimes I try to shape them back into place, but see if I can stipple these two together a little bit. You just got to make sure, just like wet on wet blending, you got to make sure the two areas are they're both wet. If one is dry, it's not gonna move around at all. So we're kind of trying to keep both of these wet, and we can kind of blend in between the two and get the transition there. Sometimes I'll scrub it a little bit if I want things to transition even more slowly. Sometimes I got to reassert the one tone or the other. In this case, I think I need to get my core shadow tone reasserted in there just a little bit. And then sometimes I'll take a natural hair brush if I want to get really subtle moments of that stippling, get things to blend together, and I'll use this brush to get some of that softer blending to occur. I'm not trying to leave a lot of texture behind. Again, I started this brush just dry and worked from there. So we can do stippling with the synthetic hair brushes too to get sometimes a little more subtle. Using lighter or heavier pressure. And then I'm going to paint in, I'm going to paint in my area of reflected light, which is supposed to be this number 4 value here. Paint it in a little bit and then do the same thing to blend between those two. And I'm trying to keep my edge nice and firm here as we go. This does wrap around up here a little bit. And then again, I'm going to grab an even smaller brush to do a little bit of stippling there and see if we can get those two colors to blend into each other nice and smooth. So this is just one other approach to blending things together. You're really trying to develop a repertoire of techniques to make these things work. Looks like the core shadow needs to be expanded down a little bit there. I'm going to grab a little more of my number 5 dark tone and I'm going to try to widen out my core shadow down here. Sometimes it seems like you're undoing some of what you did before. I'm going to take that same brush this time and try to get this stippling to kind of fade that out a little bit. And sometimes I'll do a combination of several different techniques like this. I don't want to leave my brushes sitting around too much or else they will dry out. I got a little bit of something here I need to kind of fade out a little bit. So take it, work through there. Sometimes I got to work back and forth with a couple different brushes of different values, but we can get a good transition here. Sometimes I'll scrub around just real lightly, try to get some of the paint to transition one direction or the other. If I've got a lighter color, I need to move down a little bit. I'll reinsert it a little bit. Really need a neutral brush right here. Let's see if this one will work. Using a smaller natural hair brush, I'm just trying to get these paints to fade into each other. So, another technique, you can go back in and try to get your transitions a little smoother between the different values. We don't want to see where one starts and one stops. So I wanted to introduce you to that technique to go back and revise this sphere and get your values transitioning slowly. So give that a try, check. Make sure your values are organized properly and that they transition slowly between one another. If you need to go back and reassert some of the outside edges or things, maybe right here I got a little, my stippling went over the line a little bit. I need to go back and clean up that line. I can do that. If I need to readjust any of these background values, I can go back and do that. See, I have a little bit lighter value down here. Remember, we amplified the lighter tone right in this area. So we can take that and then we can use our technique we've been talking about, and we can kind of, whoop, I've got too much paint on this brush. I'm gonna grab a different one and see if I can get this to kind of fade out. Sometimes you can scrub it around a little bit to get it to fade out. Maybe I need to get some of the darker tone. See if I can scrub some of that in to get that transition a little different. So you see how you can use the brush here, and I could re-emphasize the light there and right there also, and do kind of the same thing. So you got kind of an underlayer on here, and you can work back over it to refine it with these different techniques. So check your organization, check the placement of everything. You can even use your thumb sometimes. And revise it and refine it, and make sure your transitions are nice and smooth. Next thing we're going to do, to continue to practice blending, because blending paint is extremely important as a technique, because we use it in so many places when we're painting. So for this particular painting, we're going to start out and we're going to make just a gradation of tone. And we're just recycling the canvas. For most students, I've given you the canvas. If you have a white canvas, that's fine, but in this case we're just going to recycle, and we're going to make a gradation of tone like that. So we're going to take our big brushes here. We got our big synthetic hair brushes, and we're going to make just a big gradation. I'm just going to start with my darkest tone here, and we're practicing blending just much on a larger scale here. What we need to do here, though, is make sure we got a lot of paint, and we got to keep things wet. So I'm going to put a lighter tone here, slightly lighter. I guess this is a number 4 on the value range, and then we're going to try to blend in between these two. We're keeping our brush marks parallel, and we're just kind of moving that brush up. We can reassert the dark and push it down. Going the other way now. But my brush marks are all staying parallel with each other. You can even see I'm painting over the sides just a little bit. I have some paper down here that's allowing me to do that. And then I'll start lightening it up just a bit, grabbing that number 5 here. Lightening it up just a bit. And then I think I'm gonna grab a different brush, another large one, another large round. And I'm going to grab my light middle tone here. Well, that brush was drying out. And I'm going to just start putting the lighter tone up here. I'm going to grab some white. Just going to blend with that middle tone. And I'm starting to work down here. Now, I don't want to do away with all my dark tone. So I'm going to grab the dark brush again. And I'll start working that way. But we got to make sure the paint is wet. If we want our paint to blend, everything's got to be wet. Paint will not blend if it's dry, obviously. So you need a lot of paint, and it all needs to be wet. This one got lightened up a little bit. Uh-oh. If you're worried, if your paint was starting to act like it was going to dry out, you can even do a little spritz onto the canvas just to add some moisture so that things don't get dry and you can achieve a blend between areas. Put a little more white in here. Try to reinsert this light band. I'm going to lighten up my pressure a little bit. Head for the top. Again, we're not going to do the light tone all the way up to the top. We're going to put a little bit of a darker middle tone up there. And we're moving pretty fast. By necessity. Here. I'm getting my two brushes mixed up. I need a dark brush. I'm going to grab a different brush just so I don't have any lighter tone hidden in there. I'm trying to reinsert my darkest area. Try not to undo anything I've done previously, but sometimes it happens. And I'm going to put my lighter tone back in. continually work between the two areas. Sometimes I like to flip it over. Maybe I can just see it and my brush moves just a little differently. I gotta work back here. I need quite a bit more paint here. At this point, we got a lot of paint on the canvas. I'm picking up white paint from over there, which I don't want. So I'm just going to go only in this direction for a moment, try to get rid of that. I'm getting this transition here. I have to move back and forth. Get that slow transition. Okay. I need my darker tone here. The darkest tone, the straight burnt umber, is transparent. It has a transparent quality to it, and so we have a hard time covering with it sometimes. Our transitions are getting pretty good. Just we got kind of an infiltrator right here. I'm going to just try to finish up by kind of working back down in that direction. Our goal here is really just smooth, subtle shifting. And we're pretty good. Maybe a little more adjustment through here. And we're up. Nope, not that. Just moving up and down. Okay, so we're pretty good. Now, my suggestion is let it dry for a little while. I got one that's already somewhat, I got one that's dried here completely, and I got another one. And I'm going to show you what we're going to do on our next step with this. Some of this, I want it getting on my new painting. So we're going to take this, we're going to paint a hole into the lighter area and a light into the darker area. So I've already started a little bit here. You can see where I'm getting my my values moving here, trying to make it appear like there's a hole right there. So I'm going to take my smaller brushes here. I really am going to have to get me a second cup of water real fast. Clean these brushes and try to use some of these synthetic hair brushes this time to start to work into this area over here. So we're taking, again, we have our full palette mixed here, and too much water on the brush. I use my rag sometimes to dry the bristles out if I have too much water. And we're trying to put down our darker value here. If your painting is still wet, it's going to start to get real muddy because things are going to there'll already be so much stuff down here. Now, so I'm going to take my synthetic hair, or my natural hair brush here, light handle, and I'm just going to use a little bit of that scumbling technique here. Put down that darker tone that I'm kind of working out from there. And get a pretty good transition there. And then I'm going to grab a lighter tone here. I'm trying to get to this same tone that was already there. I'm going to use this synthetic hair. try to do similar type deal. No, I just put some down there. It's not really moving around very agreeably. I'll wash this one out and see if I can stipple back in that direction. So I put some paint down. Now let's see if I can stipple back. Use that same technique. Try to get the transition between the two more soft and subtle. That's not too bad. So we're starting to get what appears like a hole in the middle of this thing. I'm using a dark one again. These certain darker values there. Yeah, so we're starting to get what looks like a hole. We just need to get our value outside here a little more articulated, closer to the value that's around there. I'm going to use my fingers as a stippler, but I'm just trying to kind of fade off of there. I'm going to try to meet up with the values that are already there. As these things dry, they will they'll darken up just a little bit. Scrub this out just a bit. Down there, it appears to be too light. So I'm going to have to try to darken it up right there a little bit. I think that'll be pretty good. So we'll just kind of scrub back over top of that. Now, down here, we let me see if we can get that dark tone matched up any better. Transition's pretty good. Now down here we're gonna try to make a highlight in the middle of the area dark. I might make this one a little larger potentially. Let's see. Here we go. I'm gonna grab some of my white. The white is opaque. It should go on a little better. It should do cover over this a little bit better than the dark tone going over the light. The dark, obviously, the burnt umber is transparent, whereas the white is very opaque. So put down some white tone there, and again I'm gonna stipple off of here and dry out my brush. Now, either having a rag is always, I feel like, better, but a paper towel can help you dry out your brush also. I'm gonna get a little bit of a middle tone here, a darker middle tone, and again, kind of trying this stippling technique. I'm gonna start to just tap around this thing and see if I can start to get a little bit of blending going here. Sometimes the brush is a little too hairy, a little messy. Let me grab this, see if I can add some white to this, kind of work in the opposite direction. Starting to work pretty well. And then I'll get a darker value here. Going back in this other direction. And then an even darker tone. And my pressure gets a little bit lighter the further out I get. But we want it to kind of fade into what's around it. Let's see. Here's one that's more or less dry and empty. Let's see if this will help me. I'm going to work on my final transitions here. Work out from the middle. A lot of little taps. So you can see how that did. Empty it off again, just look that from the white, just a tad bit. Okay, and there we go. So we got a dark hole and a glowing light white orb here. I'm going to try to just fix up. This was a recycled painting. It's got still quite a bit of transparency to it. I probably should fix that all together, but I'm just going to try to get this to at least agree with its surroundings. So that's what you're up to with this one. You're going to paint the gradation, and I suggest let it dry. Then you can do that stippling technique I just showed you, and then you're going to put a dark hole on one side and a glowing light on the other. And that, in combination with your revised and corrected sphere, these are the two things that you need to bring next class or submit to the Google Doc for next class. I'll see you then.